Hi, and welcome back to Coach Barnabas. This is episode 60. I'm Corey, and I'll be your host. And again, thank you for joining me. Uh, this episode is one that, quite frankly, here's what I'm counting on here. I hope that through 59 episodes or through personal relationship, I've made some deposits in our relationship. Okay. I hope I've been able to contribute things, add things to you. That have you found encouraging, you found uplifting, maybe you found a nugget of wisdom in there, uh, something positive, and you walk away with a smile and feeling good, and maybe a little bit challenged, but you walk away feeling better than you did maybe before you watched or listened. This one, um, I hope you still feel that way. I really do. But for some of you, this may be a bit of a withdrawal. Okay. But I still hope we're working with the positive balance. Okay. To kind of stick with the deposit and withdrawal um, metaphor. So I hope that's the case here. But I read something recently online that a friend of mine posted, and it's really stuck with me and really challenged me to think things through. Because, well, it's related to forgiveness and really the relationship between forgiveness and reconciliation. That the two um, are unique from one another. Um, to have one, you must have the other, but that's not necessarily reciprocal. For instance, forgiveness doesn't mean you have to have reconciliation. To have reconciliation, however, there must be forgiveness. Okay. So forgiveness, let's just focus on forgiveness at this time. Forgiveness is important. It is necessary. It's a command. Okay. Now, I'm going to presume that if you are an adult of any age, even if you're not an adult and you're a teenager or a child, and you happen to be watching or listening to this, chances are you've gone this far in life having done something for which you've had to ask or you require forgiveness, where you would be wise to ask for forgiveness. And I know I have a bazillion times, and probably before the end of the day, I'll require forgiveness for something. And whether it's from a person or whether it's God, that I will probably require forgiveness, uh, you know, in the very near future, perhaps before I finish this particular episode. I don't know. But I've been thinking about this because when I think of I've had people apologize to me, ask forgiveness for things, and I tell you what, I'm fortunate because the things that people ask me for forgiveness for, it's like, are you kidding? I was never mad in the first place. Uh, but I respect the fact that you asked me for forgiveness, so of course I forgave you before you asked. But that's largely because I have to admit, I, you know, I think we've all been done wrong, but certainly don't carry around scars or anything like that. And maybe at one time I did. There were people maybe I did harbor some unforgiveness toward, or I let them affect me, or I let myself continue to view them through a lens of unforgiveness to some extent. But I'll tell you, at this stage of my life, and I'd like to think this is true for many years now, but I can't think of anybody where I don't, you know, where I harbor something against them, or certainly that I don't wish any ill upon them. But where I just, look at them and say, boy, that person. Now, with that in mind, that doesn't mean I trust everyone. Understand that. Forgiveness doesn't mean you completely waive your right, or that we are just supposed to trust everyone, that we don't exercise discernment and wisdom, So understand that forgiveness is a very delicate thing. So, but again, it is unconditional, all right? It doesn't require a condition upon the other person. They are not required to ask for my forgiveness. They're not obligated in any way. Forgiveness, if you think of forgiving a debt, okay, if you owe somebody and they say, I've forgiven you that debt, means that debt is gone. you owe them nothing any further. They have forgiven you of the debt. And so that's the thing. It's like, hey, if I have forgiven you something, you owe me nothing in return. Okay. Now this is where we cross the lane into reconciliation. All right. Now, because I've forgiven you, let's say I lent you money and, you just can't, I don't have it. I'm not going to be able to pay it back. Unforgiveness is like, hey, you need to go out and get a job. You need to borrow from somebody else. You need to sell things. You need to do something and pay this back to me. Okay. Now, you may be absolutely justified in making those demands or having that expectation. However, when you forgive and you say, you know what, just it's done, consider it a gift, and you owe me nothing. It's done. Let's move on and talk about other things, or let's move on in a relationship. Now, if that person comes back to me 6 months later and say, hey, can I borrow some more of that money? I'm probably going to tuck away that, I don't know. I don't think that's now I've crossed over into, am I enabling you by continuing to give you money? And and I know that there's a real strong likelihood you're not going to be able to repay this. Well, wisdom might say no, but if, maybe God's saying yes, continue to give to them. That's a whole other issue. But my point is that perhaps exercising a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of discernment. Okay, we've been down this road before, and perhaps it's not wise for me, and perhaps it's not healthy for me to continue to enable this behavior. Okay, that's one thing. Now, going back to reconciliation. Okay, reconciliation is, and here's another R word or RE word is, I just lost it. Restitution. There it is. There's somebody walking their dog over there. Cool. Restitution. That leads to reconciliation. Okay. So look, if a person came to me and they owe me something, I've forgiven them. They owe me nothing, but they still want to make restitution. Maybe they're not going to pay me the whole amount back, but they want to do something nice for you. Okay. That's great. It's not required. Okay. But reconciliation is something entirely different. And that requires another RE word, repentance. Okay. Where it's going to require something of them. Forgiveness requires nothing from them. The debt is paid. It's done away with. You owe me nothing. You don't even have to ask for forgiveness. This is done. You didn't ask me in the first place. I gifted you the freedom from that debt. Whether it's a behavior, whatever it may be, something they did in the past, something they did that hurt, that cost me something, that won't necessarily recover from. Okay. But I've released you of the debt of that activity, that action. And reconciliation requires something of them. And that would obviously be repentance. And that's going to take some time to earn your trust back, and all of that. So the act of reconciliation is a long drawn out process. It's not something you just say, I forgive you, and let's just go on our merry way. There's going to be, it's going to take time to rebuild that and to get back to maybe where you once were, and perhaps even healthier than you were before. And that's going to be a unique situation. It's going to take humility on the parts of both parties. Okay. Humility of the person who, I don't want to use the word victim here, but let's just, the forgiver and the forgivee. Okay. So it's going to take a certain degree of humility on the forgiver because, it's a matter of pride. It's a matter of principle. It's a matter of, you have the upper hand morally of just being able to set terms, and to not set terms that are impossible, to not set terms that are unreasonable. Okay? And for the forgivee is to say, I will do what it takes on my part. Okay. Whether it's to satisfy you, I'm going to do everything I can because you are important to me. This relationship of whatever kind is important enough for me to make changes in my own life and to make sure that I don't repeat that behavior that led to the breaking of the trust and relationship that we once enjoyed. So, this is a very important and required element in the act, in the hope of reconciliation. Okay. So my point in all of this is again, I read something recently. It was posted online, social media, and I sense that, some people who have some legitimate and genuine hurts, resent the fact that, perhaps people are counseling them to forgive, and maybe the people are also talk about reconciliation. You need to reconcile. You need to let them back into your heart and your life, and like nothing ever happened. Maybe that's the case. If so, that's not wise counsel. Okay. Because again, you have to factor in the reconciliation, and that's, that it has a certain requirement upon the forgivee. Okay. And you can't put all that burden on the forgiver. So that's an entirely different thing. So from that standpoint, I completely agree. But sometimes the forgiver can let can say, like, you don't know what I've been through, and what I've been through is awful, and everybody just thinks this person's great, and I'm overreacting, or whatever the case may be. And so now there becomes a justification in blurring the line between reconciliation and forgiveness, where there's no way I'm letting this person back in my life. You don't know what I've been through. You're full of baloney. And, I've been hurt. I've been victimized. This person has been awful to me. And, so on and so forth, and what have you. And if you know, sorry, that's a reference to a TV show that we love called The Middle. But anyway, I digress. Where I'm going with this is sometimes we can let our refusal or our absolute hesitation and toward reconciliation lead us to a certain degree of acceptable unforgiveness that can metastasize into bitterness. All right. Let me give you an example of this. 30 years ago, I was dating someone, and a long time ago, and obviously 30 years. I just did the math, and yeah. So anyway, 30 years ago, I was dating someone, and they lived on a steep hill, and she parked her car in front of the house on the street in such a manner where the gap between her house and the neighbor's house was, on the street, was enough to park at least two cars. Okay. But she parked in a manner that made it impossible to park behind her without blocking a driveway, or to park in front of her without blocking the neighbor's driveway. And so as a result, I had to park way down the bottom of the hill and hike all the way back up the hill. Now, was I physically able to do so? Sure. Was it inconvenient? Also, yes. Okay. So I made a comment. I said, just for future reference, if you wouldn't mind, and I promise you, this is how I put it. I'm not just, putting this in a way to make myself look good, anyway. So I'd asked her, I said, can you do me a favor and just park in a way where I can either pull in behind you without any problems, or park in front of you, so I'm not blocking the neighbor's driveway. And man, you'd think I was asking her for like her kidneys or something, because she went off on me and said how I was being controlling, and it was a form of verbal abuse. And I was like, what? I mean, I was stunned by this. And then her mom, because she lived with her mom jumped in and said I was being verbally abusive. And I was, and the person I was dating at the time was talking about, I could park anywhere I want, any way I want. I mean, while that's true, how hard is it to just like leave space in front of you or behind you so your boyfriend can park there, or whomever? Maybe the neighbor has a guest and they'd like to be able to park there and not down the hill. To me, it was just kind of a common courtesy I was asking for. But then they start throwing around buzzwords like abuse and controlling. And I'm like, well, whoa, that's crazy. And another person I dated for a very brief time, uh, as we were getting to know each other, you're laying your cards on the table. You're just kind of, here's my likes and dislikes. Here's blah, 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 whatever. And she made a point to say, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm late to everything. I'm going to be late for whatever it is. If that's going to bother you, then this may as well just be our goodbye, because I'm not going to change. And if you insist on me changing, then I don't need a control freak in my life. I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. You're basically demanding that somebody just excuse really what's selfish behavior. Okay, because I consider punctuality to be very respectful of another person's time. Why make people wait when all you have to do is make a simple adjustment, and by maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to be on time, or God forbid, early. How about that? And so this person, but was so dug in on, this is just who I am. I am somebody who is, punctually challenged, and you just have to learn to deal with it. If that bothers you, then we're not compatible. I refuse to change for you or whatever. And it's like, wow, that didn't even come up. But this person, so my point in these two examples, you might say, Corey, you sound like you're harboring unforgiveness. It's like, no, these things genuinely happen. Does it bother me? No. I mean, these were decades ago. I'm so far beyond that. The relationships clearly didn't work. So, okay. So, but they did happen, and so they serve as life lessons that I'm offering and sharing with you. That these people, these two ladies who didn't know each other, but they both harbored something that probably they dated somebody in the past who were maybe abusive verbally or controlling. But now what they're doing is they're making somebody else carry that person's luggage. Okay, and that's not fair. That's not right. And that's where, again, unforgiveness has now metastasized into bitterness. And you are now making other people responsible and carrying a burden, carrying a load that is not theirs. They didn't deserve it. They didn't earn it. They had nothing to do with it. But you're so dug in now because you had a bad experience that you're just making everybody accountable for it. And you're just going to, anything that even resembles them, whether it's asking a favor, asking for common courtesy or whatever, is perceived as abusive or controlling. And that's where we have to be very, very careful with, forgiving people. And I don't know what they went through previously. That's, I don't know. But maybe it was very legitimate. Maybe it was very harmful. Maybe it was very awful what they went through, but I didn't do it. So why am I bearing the brunt of whatever somebody else did? And that's where we have to be very, very careful. Are we letting the things from our bad experiences in the past carry over, and we're letting it affect relationships with other people who had nothing to do with it? And that's where we have to be really, really careful, is not to be so dug in and prideful and protective of ourselves that we become bitter and we allow it to, affect other relationships where, innocent relationships, innocent people. So, again, this topic is difficult. I like I said, I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks and really sorting through my own thoughts and feelings and what does the Bible say, and everything. And this is where I've kind of landed. It's like, forgiveness is absolutely required of us. And honestly, who am I to hold a grudge? Who am I to be angry at somebody else when I have hurt other people? I have sinned against God. I've affected people and harmed them with my words or my actions or my irresponsibility or any number of things. And I've had to ask forgiveness. I've had to be forgiven, whatever the case may be. So who am I to have been a recipient of forgiveness to hold unforgiveness towards anybody else. I've not endured anything to justify me being unforgiving to anybody else. Okay. And so by that standard alone, I feel like, forgiving somebody is really quite easy, and it releases you all the toxins that come with holding on and harboring unforgiveness. I'm free of that. And, but I let that serve, again, you taper that with wisdom. Am I going to let them back in? Am I going to just open up my heart and life and home and whatever else to somebody who's proven that that's a bit more than they deserve, and that wouldn't be wise. So exercise discernment, but also not let it metastasize into bitterness to where it's like, I'm not letting anybody else tell me what to do. I'm not letting anybody else, in, I'll let you in only so far, but the rest of this is off limits. That's bitterness. And now you're letting it affect other areas of life. It's become toxic, and it will interfere with the best things that could happen in your life if you let it. So I hope this all makes sense. If you have thoughts on this, I would love for you to leave some comments behind. Share your thoughts. Maybe, if you're willing to share experiences, that's great too. But I hope this opens doors to some conversation. If nothing else, I hope it opens up some doors to really thinking about this and praying about it and say, God, am I holding on to something? Am I holding on to any level of unforgiveness? Help me to forgive. Understand, there's a saying, forgive and forget. I don't think those two, like I said, I brought up two things from decades ago. I have not forgotten. They've served as something of a life lesson, but I'm not affected by it anyway. I've never held anybody else accountable for it. It's just, they're kind of almost funny stories. They're comical on the level that they are. But I think they serve as really good examples of how, people use buzzwords or completely overreact over something simple, but because there's that root of bitterness inside of them, gets blown up and extrapolated into something it never was, and then it causes this big chasm, in a relationship that doesn't deserve it. So just think about that, dwell on it, pray about it. And be delivered from that, be free from that. And if you think I'm just full of, hot air and this, whatever, then, let me know. But, at the same time, I think, there's something to take away from this, whether you agree or disagree, or whether initially you're like, I don't want anything to do with that. That really bothers me. Just pray about it and just see if there is anything, be honest. And, just like the psalmist is like, just reveal within me if there's anything in there that doesn't belong. Is there any wickedness in my heart that I just want to be free of? Bring it to my attention, expose it to me. Is there anything I've let in my life that I've let root and metastasize into other things that is affecting not just myself, but it's affecting my relationships with others? Have I let that happen? So really, really be truly introspective. Let God come in. Let the Holy Spirit reveal things to you that might be painful, but also might be incredibly liberating for you. Okay? So that's my encouragement for you today. Thank you for sticking with me and listening, watching. I hope you will like and subscribe and do all that kind of stuff. But I hope, this has brought some things to light that maybe we could all work on and try to, free ourselves from and free other people from. If we have unforgiveness, let them free from that. Forgive them. They owe you nothing anymore, and you can be okay with that. Okay. So that's it. Thank you for watching, listening. Be encouraged. Be an encourager. I look forward to talking again very soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining the Coach Barnabas podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your support by liking and subscribing to the podcast and setting up notifications so we can let you know when new episodes are available. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. Make a difference today.